And now we're into AI Builder, masterclass series stuff from Aaron Moon.
All right, Aaron, go.
All right. I don't know about masterclass, but we'll see. We'll see.
Nice hat.
Oh yeah, thanks. No, I have to make a comment on the hat first. You can see the picture here on the slide. This was me before quarantine, and now this is me after quarantine. Still haven't been able to go get a haircut.
You're not
So I
handling
hope
this one
you'll,
well.
yeah, I know. I hope everybody will forgive me for being a little bit casual. I just couldn't make it work. Couldn't make it work today. All right, so I'm excited to talk about AI Builder and how we can use this tool within the Power Platform. So I'm going to go through a couple of different slides to start off with and just give everybody a baseline knowledge of what AI Builder is and what it's capable of. And then we're going to jump into a demo. So I want to show you what it looks like when you use AI Builder within an app, as well as within Power Automate flows. So to start off, let's just talk about AI as a starting place here. You know, we hear about AI a lot. Microsoft likes to talk about AI a lot. And we're hearing about companies that are starting to use AI and starting to see value, right? But typically, we're only seeing that in larger organizations. So we hear that, oh, there's a lot of potential here, but we're only seeing a few companies really start to make sense of AI and be able to use it. And the reality is that AI is complex. We would like to be able to use it, but most of us aren't data scientists. I'm not a data scientist. And we often don't have access to the funding or the skills that might be required to really understand and use AI in things that we're doing every day, right? It seems like it's kind of this thing out there that sounds cool, but we don't really know how to use it. And so that's where AI Builder comes in. It's Microsoft's attempt at trying to bring AI to everyone and into this citizen developer space that we talk about when we're talking about Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, these tools that are low code, easy to use, that anybody can get into and start to build things that can provide value. And so AI Builder is that tool that everyone should be able to use to plug AI into their apps, automations, and analytics. So when we talk about AI Builder and how that actually is used within the Power Platform in these tools, we're able to sort of break this out. I'm going to just get really practical here to start off with. If you would like to use AI in your Power Automate flows, these are the steps that you can go and do that. And actually, this is a little bit out of date because very recently Microsoft has updated this, and that was what Rod was talking about earlier. And so it's still there, but selecting the predict action within the Common Data Service connector. So if you're in Power Automate and you're using the Common Data Service connector, then you can use predict and access AI Builder models. And so right there within your Power Automate, you can access AI and use AI in whatever automation you're doing. So you select that model, you utilize it, and then it's just an action. It produces outputs, just like anything else that you might put into a flow. If you're looking at using AI within Power Apps, then there's actually a couple different ways that you can do that. One that's in preview, I think it's still in preview, is being able to actually use AI Builder models within your formulas within a Canvas app. So if you're building a Canvas app within Power Apps, you can actually type a formula out to say, use this particular model that I may have. A couple other ways that you can do that is there are components, AI Builder components that you can just insert. An example of that is the business card reader, and a couple others that I'll show you guys, where basically you can just hit insert and drop a little box into your app that's going to use an AI Builder model and do something for you. That also works on the model-driven app side. There's the business card reader control there as well that you can insert. And then the other way that you can do that is oftentimes your AI Builder models are going to store data within the Common Data Service. So when you think about accessing the Common Data Service, all of the tools that we talk about with Power Platform, Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, these all can access the Common Data Service. And so your AI model data can be stored there and can just be accessed in that manner as well. So we jump into actually talking about the different types of models. I've been saying models a lot. And really, we think about AI as something that you tell it sort of what to look for, you pass it information, and then it spits out some kind of answer. So, there's data scientists out there who have built these AI models. They work at Microsoft. They're not just out there, but they work at Microsoft, and they're writing the code. They're, doing the details here to say, this is what this model should do, and sort of help to build that. And then some of these, particularly these custom models here, require a little bit of extra work from us when we want it to do a particular thing. So with these custom models, we're actually going to have to do a little bit of training. We're going to have to feed these models some data to basically tell it what to look for. So for instance, we talk about the prediction model. This model is really focused on determining the likelihood of a particular outcome, a business outcome. So it's really looking for sort of trying to say yes or no. Is this going to happen? Yes, or is it going to happen? No. And so, you're going to feed it some data that maybe you can, it's, historical data from your business, something maybe to say, is this prospect, is this sales prospect, this company that we're talking to, are they likely to purchase from us? Yes or no? And then you can feed the model historical data about what types of companies have purchased from you in the past, things like industry and revenue and all of those different things. So you could feed it that information and say, okay, it's going to realize that these types of companies, they have purchased from us, these haven't. And then you could run this AI prediction model and predict whether or not this particular company would purchase from you. What's the likelihood, right? Would they yes or no? So that's just an example. I'm just trying to give a little bit of concrete to this, because again, it's kind of pie in the sky until we get into the weeds. So talking about some of these other ones, you've got category classification. So this is simply just, you'll notice I've got the different categories, the different columns here. So the category is basically saying what type of model it is. And so the category classification, the second row, is a language model, which means it takes text. You feed it a bunch of text, and then it will actually tag your text with categories, essentially. So it's helpful for trying to classify or detect the type of things that your text might be about and routing that. So you can think about a customer service, maybe like a help desk scenario where you send in an email to the help at email address. We run an AI model on that email to say, what is this email about and who should we send it to? Who should take care of this? So category classification there. Entity extraction is also a text model in that it can scan text. It can process basically data to try and, again, sort of tag and classify. But it's very similar in that way. It's also trying to, I think this one in particular, if I remember correctly, is pulling out like if there's numbers, if there's the different types of data within that text. You've got form processing, which we will look at a little bit today in my demo. But this is, the idea of taking a picture maybe of an invoice and then extracting the data points from it. So you see this is a vision category, meaning this is something where you're using a camera or a picture, an image. Same thing with object detection. That's, you take a picture of a shelf and it recognizes the different, cans and the labels or the different objects that it sees, recognize an apple from a banana, that sort of thing. So again, this is an example of some of the custom AI builder models that are out there that, again, you can start to use within Power Automate or PowerApps. We've got that availability column there sort of telling you where you can go use these today. And just so you know, we'll talk about it a little bit, but if it does say Power Automate only, there's still ways that you can make that work within PowerApps and some of these tools because again, they all do work together. But these are the custom models. So again, to reiterate, these have to be trained. You have to do a little bit of work in order for these to be ready for prime time. So for object detection, you have to feed it images of apples so that it knows to look for apples when you're using that model.
Hey, Aaron.
But yeah,
Quick question for you. How many apples you get to feed it?
that's a great question. So with AI models, when you're training them, it's always best to feed it more examples, right?
That's an awesome answer.
The more that you train it, the better it is. So Microsoft has, as you go through each of the models, they recommend, I think for form processing, they say you have to give us at least 5 examples of an invoice for this model to work. And I'm not sure about object detection if there's a minimum number there. I think there probably is, but again, the more that you give it, the better. So there are minimums that they want you to do, but the more you feed it, the more you train it, the more accurate it's going to be. But that's a great question. Thank you. So in contrast to the custom models, we have pre-built models. And these are models that Microsoft has already trained for us, which means we can go and use these right now. They're ready to go. So the business card reader, Microsoft has trained this model already to recognize business cards, lots of different types of business cards, and be able to extract the name, the email address, the company from those. So we don't have to train this. We could just go use it in Power Automate or PowerApps. We've got category classification here. This is the same model that we mentioned previously, except this model has been focused on particular categories already. So this particular, when we're using the pre-built category classification model from Microsoft, is focused on customer feedback categories that customer service or help desk scenario is talking about, trying to recognize if that text is a issue, if it's a compliment, if it's about maybe pricing or billing. There's some standard categories it will recognize. With entity extraction, this one has been trained already to extract, again, those key elements from text. And I think this one is putting them in terms of different types of data, like recognizing if it's demographic data or different data types, like I mentioned. So if it's it's a number, it's a text, it's something else along those lines in terms of what type of information is there. When you look at key phrase extraction, language detection, again, those are pretty straightforward, but it's pulling out key phrases it finds. So, it's just going to pick out the main, the words it thinks are important from the text. Language detection simply detects what language this text is in, which I think Rod mentioned, but it's really helpful if you're in a customer service help desk scenario. I'm sure there's other great scenarios you guys could think of, but you get a support ticket, you get an email that you need to route, and you say, what language is this? Who should we send it to? Aaron, only speaks these languages, but Rod speaks these other languages, and we know, we want to send that to the correct person automatically. So we can run this AI model when that comes in and automatically route it to a particular person or department or whatever that is. And then you've got text recognition. So this one I'm actually going to show, but this is, you can take a picture of handwritten or printed text and it will extract the text. So you can actually pull the text off of a piece of paper and then use it throughout an app or an automation. And then sentiment analysis is another one that we're going to show today as well. And that is basically determining if a piece of text is positive or negative. And so I want to go ahead and jump in because I know people don't like the slides. We want to see this stuff in action. So let's go ahead and show what I've got for the demo. Rod, if you can just confirm
Yes,
that you
sir.
see when my screen switches. Awesome. All right, so I've got a couple different things that I'm gonna walk you guys through today, but I thought I'd just show you from the make.powerapp side first. So I actually have a solution out here that I put this stuff into, and this is just me. I always have to put things in solutions. And I recommend that you do too, if you're not. A solution is a great way to package something, and then you can move it to different environments if you want to. So I can actually export this as a zip file and save that somewhere, and then later import it into another environment.
Hey, quick question on that, Aaron. When
Yeah,
you
sure.
move through environments, do you have to be particularly careful, or is it an easy thing, or do you have to, should you budget some extra time to cover just when you move it into that environment for any other discrepancies or weirdness, strangeness about?
Yeah, it's not something that I had time to get into a lot of detail on today, but there are some things you need to be aware of. I've got my flows in this solution, and flows right now, these are Power Automate flows, are a little funky in solutions. So just be aware of that. And maybe that's something that we can talk about at a future date.
Just full on solution set presentation. Gotcha.
Sure,
Nice.
but yeah, I think it's something that you should think about. Is using solutions to help package things, but do be aware there is some complexity there. That's a good question. All right, so I've got those three things in my solutions were, number one, my app that I want to show you guys. It's got a bunch of AI stuff in it, and then I've got two Power Automate flows that are actually connected to my app. That we're going to look at to see, sort of how that's helping with this process. So to walk through, the first thing I've got to show here is the business card reader. So this is actually one of those pre-built components that's ready to go, and it's this little box right down here. This box is something that I went into the Components tab and I did Insert, and there you go. I had this box ready to go, built from Microsoft. And what I did was I added in a couple things in here just to show some of the outputs. So what we do is we click on this. If I was on a phone, I just tap on it. It's going to open up a particular folder on my hard drive for me to select something from. And so I'm going to select a picture of a business card that I've taken. So I want to think about, again, how would we use this? And my scenario here that we're going to walk through is basically pre-COVID, I'm at a conference and I'm meeting people and exchanging business cards. So I've got this business card from Aaron Moon, and he works for Velosio. And so after the fact, I'm going to come in here, or maybe while I'm at the event, I'm going to take a picture of it. And then I want to scan that business card to grab all of that data and store it somewhere. Maybe put it into my sales application, my CRM system. And so when I take a picture of this, you can see right here, this is the output. All of this stuff is coming from this box. It's the output of this component. So we've got the picture, which has actually been cropped. So it's actually been cropped down to help make sure that we've got a clear view of it. And then right here, this is all of the stuff that's coming out of the AI builder model. So it's actually extracted the company name, the name that it thinks is the full name, the email address, the street, the website. And so it's actually coming through out of the AI builder model and telling me that's what it thinks these things are. Following on to our story, so let's say that while I was meeting Aaron, I scribbled some notes on the back of the business card. And so what we want to do is we want to use the text recognizer component, which is again very similar, just a component I can insert. It's ready to go. And I'm going to upload the picture, a picture of the back of my business card. And I've got some chicken scratch here. That's my pretty bad handwriting. And we'll see that, we should see. Looks like it might not be working. We might have to look at it. What we should have seen there, we'll look at it in just a second, is that the text should have come through. You can see that it did recognize the text that's here. It highlighted it, and it should have thrown that in here as sort of what it thinks that text is. And typically when I do this, it does an okay job at my handwriting, but my handwriting's pretty bad. But when you come down to like the printed text, like Velosio and what's your next, it actually gets that perfectly, punctuation and everything.
Aaron, when we have done this, trust us that this is live demos. but it does do a better job recognizing Aaron's chicken scratch versus mine. So we have, I have thrown some stuff down, into the system, and it just choked on it. Yeah, I don't know what this is, and it it even tries to figure out if it's gibberish versus not gibberish. So I mean, the intelligence behind it is pretty neat when it's building these scenarios up and using these algorithms to say, all right, is it this versus that? And this is what we think it says. But it's it does do a good job of checking that chicken scratch itself.
Try it one more time. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's wanting to work today, which is funny. It worked yesterday. So we'll see if we have a little bit of time. I'll look at this, see if I can figure out what's going on. It might have been something that changed recently since I built this. But let's walk through a couple of the other items, because I do have two other big items that I'd like to show. And the big one here that I think is pretty cool is this sentiment analysis. So what I have for this example is a bunch of tweets. So basically I have my app connected up to Twitter, and when I put in a search parameter here and hit the search icon, it's going to go out to Twitter and pull back everything that has this tag in it. So PowerApps is one of the tags that you'll see out on Twitter a lot for the Power Platform community. So you can go out and look at this hashtag if you'd like to see what people are doing and saying. There's lots of cool things out there. So when I do that, you see we've got tweets coming in. And then the next thing I've got is basically a get sentiment button. When I press this, it's actually going to take all of these tweets and run them through an AI builder sentiment model to determine if they are happy, sad, neutral, or something else. And you'll see we get back some results here. Most of these are positive, which I would hope. But we do have one that's neutral, which basically just means, it didn't look like there was anything that was particularly happy, but nothing particularly sad either. And we can scroll down through here. I see, I don't think there's any, oh, there's some negative ones. Uh-oh, yep, here we go. We had some outages earlier, and that's where these are coming from. So you can see here that the AI builder model has run on these tweets, and it's sent back this negative, positive. These are the results from the AI builder about each of these tweets. And then I just threw in, this icon here to make it a little fun. And so if you're thinking about how you could use this in a business sense, perhaps you do want to monitor particular things that are happening on social media about your company or about a particular topic. This could be one way to do that. Or, again, if you've just got text that you'd like to evaluate and say, is this happy, is this sad? And maybe that can help in some way to, really get some business value, understand what people are saying about certain topics. All right, and then the last thing that I had was the form processor model. So this is one that I did have to train. And I actually just did, very basic example here that you can actually go out and do on the Microsoft Docs site. There's instructions on how to set up and try out this form processor tool. And so when you do that, you can follow those steps, and you'll get a couple example documents here, of invoices. You train your model with these 5 invoices. And then now when you run one of those invoices through this form recognizer component that I've just thrown again into my app, then it's going to extract out all of the information about that invoice. And you can see here, I've got the company, the address, the website, the date, the balance, and then I've got the invoice lines. So I can actually extract out here and say, okay, these are the, the products or services that were purchased and the amounts as well. So pretty cool way that you can take a paper form and make that digital very quickly. All right, so the last thing, so I wanted to walk through my flows, which I think, am I still good? I've got about 5 minutes, guys.
You have all the time you need, my friend.
All right, I'm taking all of it. No, okay, so I just wanted to show for the sentiment analysis piece, let's jump back into this and just show the behind the scenes a little bit. So the way that I built this was everything is in this main get sentiment button. And I just wanted to show how, how I broke this down so that you can do this if you'd like. So the first thing that we do, if we start in the middle of this formula, and then we'll build our way out, is that we have a call to the Twitter data source. So I've got Twitter as a data source in my app, and I'm using the function search tweet, which is part of that connector, part of that what's available with Twitter through PowerApps. And then I'm feeding it the text. So this right here, search text, is my text box. So it's just going to take whatever's in this box here and search Twitter using that. It will then return all of those results. And then we sort of jump out into the next formula here, which is the add columns. So I'm going to take all of those tweets that are returned, and you can see here's, well, we didn't have a result, but it would, we have all the results of the tweets, which would be the text and the user and the language and things like that. I'm going to add a column, which is basically just a way for me to add a column within my app so that I can have a little bit of extra data for each of those tweets. And I'm adding a sentiment column. Okay, so for each tweet, it'll have a column that says sentiment. And then what I'm doing for each of those, for each row, is I'm going to run a Power Automate flow, which is what this is right here. I'm running that automation, that flow, and I'm feeding it two things. I'm feeding it, number one, the language code, which is actually coming from Twitter. So Twitter sends us what language it is. And then I'm also feeding it the text of the tweet. So again, both of these things are just coming from what's returned from Twitter. And when this runs, then it's going to return the sentiment value. So it's going to run, it's going to send back a result, which will be the sentiment value, and we're putting that into this column. Ultimately, we get this collection of tweets where we have all of the information about the tweet, this, and included in here is the sentiment value that we've added in, positive, neutral, positive. And that's what my gallery here is built off of, and my icons are based on. Just to go quickly and look at the flows that are actually doing that process, returning that sentiment value. So we've got actually two flows here, and let's go ahead and jump into both of these. All right, so this is the first one here that is basically triggered by my Power App. So you see the first row in a Power Automate is always the trigger. So this is triggered by my Power App. When I click that Get Sentiment button, it does a couple things. It gets the language code in the tweet text that we fed it as those parameters that come in through this trigger. And then we're actually going to run a child flow. So I did this really just to prove that I could, and as a good demo example, but also for a couple other reasons. So this action right here is actually going to run our get text and predict sentiment flow, and I'm passing it the language code and the text. So we jump over to this flow. So it's actually going to trigger this child flow. It's going to again get the language code and the text, and then it actually does the predict sentiment step, where it takes our sentiment analysis model, feeds it the language code, whether or not it's English or Spanish, feeds it the text, and then produces an output. Now, the reason I did it this way is that you can think about this structure when you're building Power Automate to make child flows that are very modular and focused on one particular thing so that they're reusable. So I did it this way because I could have multiple Power Automations out there, things that are doing different things. And if I needed to send text, it doesn't have to be a tweet. It could just be any text and language. I could call this get text and predict sentiment in order to basically feed it a piece of text, say what language it is, and get a prediction on sentiment. And so I could reuse this multiple times throughout multiple different flows. So it responds and says whether or not it's positive, negative, back into our first flow here. I parse the results just because those results come back in JSON. And then I send the response back to my app. And I say, here is the sentiment value of this tweet that we just analyzed. So it's kind of a back and forth thing there, but I think it's a really good example of a a pattern that you can follow of creating child flows in order to do a particular thing, which is simply just take a language, take a text, and give us the sentiment. And also connecting into PowerApps. So again, if you think about the ways that when we're looking at those models, some of those were only available in Power Automate. We can use PowerApps and Power Automate together in this manner to make sure that we can use all of these models. Now, I mentioned, as Rod said in the beginning, there was an update to now that AI Builder has its own connector or sort of action grouping out in Power Automate. So you can come out here to see all of the models that we've talked about today. I was using in my flow here, I was using the old manner, which is through the Common Data Service connector. But this is sort of the new way, the recommended way. So I need to update my Power Automate sometime soon here in order to use the actions out here in the AI Builder connector.
And Aaron, quick question on this.
Yeah.
When you're setting this up and pulling your stuff from Twitter, you're basing it on your Aaron Moon account, or is it better to be using a company account that you've got access to?
You could definitely use a company account. For this example, it is just underneath my at Aaron M. Moon Twitter, which I should have said at the beginning. Could have sent a tweet and seen it showed up here. Oh, did you? We'll refresh here to see if Rod said something bad about me. But you definitely could. There you go. Let's see if it's positive or negative. You could definitely use a company account. The way PowerApps works, if you were to run this, it would ask you to provide Twitter credentials. And so, yeah, your tweet there's pretty positive. But that's a good question. So just to wrap up, and then I know we'll have time for questions here at the end. So, if you do have any questions, put those in the chat. We'll have some time at the end. I can talk more about some of those things. Maybe we can look and see why my text recognizer model didn't work.
Hey, Aaron, before we move on,
yeah.
we just have 3 questions, and I think
sure.
pretty quick answer. If we could throw them at you,
Sure.
and of course, Rod, Aaron, Eric, any of you guys can answer. But here's a question: Is AI Builder or any AI feature premium subscription?
It is. So that's not something that I had a slide here on, but there is an extra cost to AI Builder. So you can go look that up, and I believe it's just a monthly cost. It's fairly, I think it may be a little bit pricey right now to start off, but you get a certain number of basically AI Builder credits that you use whenever an AI model runs. You pay monthly, and that sort of all of those credits are pooled at your organization level.
Right. So one other question: Are we absolutely required to use the Common Data Service to use the AI Builder technology?
Yeah, so AI Builder does require a Common Data Service. There are a couple of the models are not dependent on Common Data Service necessarily, but some definitely are, as in they actually, I mentioned earlier on, they store data in the Common Data Service. But yes, it's fairly dependent on you having at least a PowerApps subscription or something where you do have a Common Data Service environment where those can live.
But we could build a kind of a blended approach where if we've got a SQL server doing a bunch of things, we could just tap into the Common Data Service for the parts that needed for the AI to run. I mean, I think you could put together a kind of not a Frankenstein system, but you could blend the system together to meet those particular needs.
Yeah, I shouldn't say that you're limited to only using AI Builder on data in the Common Data Service, but you are required from more of an infrastructure perspective that AI Builder needs Common Data Service in order to be set up and to be able to sort of run on top of.
To basically act upon the data that you're collecting, regardless of the front end kind of data source, if you will.
Right. You could feed SQL data through an AI Builder model, but you have to set up an AI Builder model using a Common Data Service environment.
Yeah, or even non-database information that you're collecting, as you did even from Twitter, right? So you're thinking about unstructured data that is out there, and there's a lot of that as well that you could basically provide some actions against, but then capture it in a systemic way, and then act against it with AI Builder.
Right, and then another point here is again that AI Builder is built on Azure. So you have Azure Cognitive Services. Is basically there's Azure underneath all of this, so you can always use some of those pieces standalone directly through Azure if you needed to.
Mm-hmm. And Aaron, as you kind of look at AI Builder and kind of the ways in which you went ahead and educated and learned and invested in understanding this technology, what were some of those sources? And just kind of share that. I think that's an important part of being part of a community here, is that part of the role and goal is to educate as well, as we did in the Apps in a Day.
Yeah, there's really great links out on the Microsoft Docs site. I think that would be the first place I would point people to. There's full walkthroughs, including test data and things that you can go and install in order to try that out. So that's something that after the event, I think we can probably just post that stuff right into the App in a Day alumni group.
Yeah, cool. And then how would you advise, Aaron? How would you advise people as they're entering this? I mean, we're sort of, it has been marketed as kind of citizen developer, low code, no code, types of applications. And I think people saw a little bit of that today, but how would they, as they had ideas, what are kind of best practices in terms of developing that model? How would they avail somebody of, kind of some more advanced kind of concepts, like somebody with your skill set?
Are you asking more like you said more advanced? Are you talking about trying to get into more development of the model itself, or are you just saying building apps and automation like we went through today?
Yeah, as the team and as the community kind of looks at this this application, how do they best engage? Is it best to just go out and learn and start learning that way, or is it best to kind of get an expert in for a couple of days, as we did in an App in a Day, in a single day, and sort of get some guidance and around what best practices are?
Yeah, no, I think as with all of these tools, there's a lot of good information out there coming out from Microsoft as well as from other people in the community. So, I would suggest that if you've got the will, to learn, there's a lot of things out there that can get you pretty far. Of course, there's people like Velosio who, we would be happy to talk to people about this and sort of help guide you. But if you're looking for self-service, the Docs site, the community sites, there's lots of people out on YouTube these days making great content around all of this stuff. So I think there's plenty of places you could go to self-serve if you want.